Well, I'll show you the cover. So this is Burnt Offerings. I think the inspiration for it really, I had been watching The Handmaid's Tale, and I'd read the book, and I had been watching The Handmaid's Tale, and obviously, it's quite dystopian the way it's been done, but they're all things that have happened throughout history to women, in different sort of at different times. So that sort of got us thinking about the witch trials. In my teens, I went to like a really religious secondary school. I always found it strange that we sort of read the Bible and we read we learned all these things about religion and about that, but the witch trials in how religion played into those and the way women were treated during those times, none of that was discussed, and it felt like there were so many women killed, and there were so many women lost their lives, lost loved ones, lost friends, were swept up in them. That it's always sort of been something that's niggled with us from sort of being 15, 16. And then, like I say, it came back into my head when I watched The Handmaid's Tale. So I just started, I had read other witch trial books, but they were from a point of view of richer women, I suppose, wealthier settings, and there wasn't really anything from a first person perspective of someone who was just living a normal life or living a harder life, because they were also swept up in it, and it wasn't sort of this not fantastical thing, but it was like, I think when it comes from a wealthier point of view, you don't quite see how brutal it was and how badly the people that were sort of swept up in it were treated. So Burnt Offerings is told from 3 points of view. It's from Bess, who was the main character, her daughter Jenny, and then Agnes Sampson. Agnes Sampson is sort of Bess's adopted mother. So it's Bess is in first person, and then we've got sort of the other two, Jenny, our daughter, and then Agnes, who would be our mother. A lot of the historical facts in the novel are correct. So Agnes Sampson was one of the women that was swept up during the North Berwick witch trials. Originally, it was a woman called Gaila Strunken, who was she was a maid, and the man she worked for, our employer, accused her of witchcraft. She was tortured, and she gave the names of 80 women, and all of those women were sort of swept up in these witch trials. And at the time, King James Princess Anne was travelling from Norway, I think it was, or Denmark, I should say, on a ship. And the ship nearly sank with her on it, and King James blamed witches for this storm that almost sank the ship carrying Princess Anne. And that was sort of, all of the events sort of happened together. So Gaila Strunken giving her confession and naming these 80 women in the sinking of the ship, it was like the perfect storm. So King James got involved in these particular witch trials because he believed these were the women that were to blame for the storms, in that it was sort of heresy, really. And so I wanted to sort of bring to light this witch trial. It was really the first one in Scotland. It's sort of what set Scotland aflame. And I wanted, like I say, to tell it from the point of view of these women. So Agnes Sampson's a real person. I've sort of tried to stick to research, and I try to stick to the descriptions that were given of her, the way she held herself. There's even a point where King James becomes involved in the book, which is what happened. And when she met King James, all the research says that she whispered something to him in his ear, to prove that she was a witch. It was something to do with what happened between him and his wife in the bedroom. So I've sort of I've used artistic license in that part of the book to give Agnes Sampson a voice so that we hear what she says to him. But yeah, I've sort of blended fiction with a lot of the history. All of the women named in the book as well, because there's a lot of female characters, because it goes from that sort of their arrest right through the prison process, to some executions, some tortures, and then sort of the outcome of the book. But every woman named in the book is taken from a list of women who were arrested across Scotland during these witch trials. And not just these witch trials, the ones, I think there was almost 5,000 Scottish women, men and women, who were arrested during the sort of the witchcraft, I suppose, I want to say era, but yeah. So in this time period, it was absolutely horrific. All of the it is quite graphic. The torture scenes are quite graphic, and that was quite a hard thing to research, because you're sort of reading these things in these were real women that these horrible things happened to, and I think you also start to realize that they really didn't have a lot of agency. They didn't have a lot of sort of, I don't know, things that we sort of take for granted now, like we can vote and we can have credit cards and we can own a house in our own name and we can divorce husbands, and these were things that weren't that these women didn't have. They were seen more as, I don't know, possessions. In given me job as well, there's some domestic violence in the novel, and I, sort of, from Bess's point of view, she's with her husband, who is quite, I suppose, coercively controlling. He is violent as well, but I also wanted to explore the coercive control in things that, even though it's a different time setting, that the things that are still happening to women today, the feelings that women still have. So I really wanted to explore that sort of theme, along with the witch trials, in the fact that a lot of times people stirred up hatred for women or accused men and women of witchcraft is a means to get rid of them. It was neighbour disputes. You didn't like your neighbour, so you could use it as a device to get rid of someone, to get land from someone. It wasn't necessarily, the woman who was pagan and who was, a midwife, and they were just ordinary people going about their ordinary lives, and they would be swept up, because people lied and people told stories and in for a desired end. So some of this novel explores that and explores sort of things that people see, how these can be twisted, how lies can be told, and how things can be embellished, and how, like, when there's a crowd mentality and one person says one thing, a lot of people jump on. It's like, I don't know, we see things now where someone will put something on Facebook and then it's like a pile-on of people saying things and people being derogatory, and they might not know what's going on, and they're just throwing words around and accusations around. Oh yes, I've seen so and so do this. Even though 400 years have passed, the things that were happening then are still happening to people now. We still have these witch hunts. We still have these things where people throw accusations around, and then everyone else gets involved, and we just haven't really moved on. So I wanted this book to be about that, about I suppose women suffering, in the fact that, holding up a mirror to how our lives are now, so that we can see, how far we've come, but also how far we've still got to go. Yeah, and like I say, there was a lot of research went into it. Just things like the names of all the women. If you're interested in the research, there's a great website. I think it might be Edinburgh University that have developed it, but it's a map of Scotland in it's got every woman that was involved in the witch trials across Scotland that were arrested, all men as well, because sometimes men were arrested, and there is a man arrested in the book. But it was heavily women. But yeah, this map, it has the names of every woman, everyone's listed across this period in history, and you can click on it. You can move around the map and you can see what they were arrested for, when they were arrested, when they were executed. So I love the idea of naming them in this book. So every female character has a name taken from the map of the witch trials. Just I wanted, like I say, the original idea in the book but it was too difficult to do, was to put all the names in the front and back cover, so that they were sort of named is a nod to all the people that lost their lives. But there just wasn't enough room to put them all in. And yeah, it's three very different stories, I suppose, from three different viewpoints of what it was like being a mother and your child being swept up in it, being a daughter and seeing your mother swept up in it, and then being someone who, Bess, the main character, is stuck in the middle and not knowing where your child is, and also terrified about your mother, in how that played out into our life, and how you can. I think the tagline I used was, "How far would you go when the truth can't set you free?" Because even though these women said, "I'm not a witch," they knew they weren't witches. It didn't matter what they said, what they did. They couldn't prove their innocence when everyone else was telling lies. In that was it, really. With the witch trials, a lot of it was, a whole storm of lies, in so many lives ruined, and so many women swept up in it, and so many people hurt. Husbands wanting to get rid of wives so they can marry someone else because they couldn't divorce. Just, I don't know. So yeah, so it's quite a dark. I don't know if I'm selling it very well. It's quite a dark novel. But there's like I say, there's a lot of dark themes, and I think some reviewers love the way Bess has been portrayed. Some have said that Bess, they're annoyed at how much she still wants a husband to save her, and still thinks that he is this good man that she married, and he in with the coercive control. I wanted to explore the gaslighting, and how, even though these women, even now, women, they can be assaulted violently, but they still have this connection with this partner, and they still think that this partner won't do it again. That they're gaslit into, I don't know, a very different belief system. So Bess, although some readers will find her frustrating, is in that sort of coercive relationship where it's quite violent, it's coercive, but because of the gaslighting, and because of the treatment that she's had, she's sort of, it's ingrained in her that he isn't as bad as that she thinks he is, or that she very much downplays what's gone on with her, and even to the last second thinks that he'll sort of save her, I suppose. So yeah, it's a difficult, it was a difficult one to write, but a one I really wanted to explore. Like I say, because these women weren't, a lot of the times they weren't wealthy, they didn't have anything. They were just ordinary people. They were your neighbour, they were the one that worked in the bakery, they were, there, but for the grace of God, they all went, because at any point, they could be named and swept into something totally catastrophic that they were never guilty of in the first place. And I hope I've done the research justice. Some of the torture methods that I've put in the book weren't used just in the North Berwick witch trials. They were used across the globe. But they were brutal. And I wanted to make the scenes graphic in as much as obviously they're from a first person point of view as well. But I wanted to live and breathe what that was like, not just hear about it from a different character or characters discussing it. I wanted it to be with Bess while she was being tortured, so that it to really make us feel it, I suppose, and how brutal it really was, really ground within it. So yeah, it is. It's a book that's about women's love for each other, I suppose. In how much women throughout history have been affected by things like this. Yeah, sorry, I've absolutely waffled on and gone off on a million tangents. But yes, I suppose I'll read. I've got a bit that I'm going to read. It's just a couple of pages. The chapter is just before Bess gets arrested. So at this point, our husband's gone missing. He's stolen the rent that he collects for the man that they work for. He's left Bess sort of in the thick of it. He's walked away with it all, and she's trying to find him. So between her and Agnes Sampson, they've gone looking for him. So this is just as she gets arrested. Towards dawn, I'd left them back at the crossroads, with Dr. Fian now fully in control of his wayward limbs and his mount. The stars still lingered against the inky black of night as it fought against the sunrise. I'd been grateful for their company, but beneath the silence of the tree boughs, my mind began to uncoil, stretching and flexing and allowing itself to think. What if Rivet was already looking for me? The thought of it terrified me. At any moment, our paths could cross. If I could just get to Jenny and get her back to the refectory, unseen, then we would be safe, at least for a while. The rumours would spread like blistering damp, already dripping from the lips of the washerwomen. What happened when the bitter, twisted lies became truth? St. Andrew's refectory was no place to hide a child. I would give my mother 3 days. If she hadn't managed to find Rupert by then and put an end to this nonsense with Master Rivet, then we would have to leave. There would be nothing else for it. We'd have to flee like the Catholics. Mistress Cochrane wouldn't appreciate me arriving at such an ungodly hour. I squinted in the direction of Mill House, not a flicker of light. I'd often wondered how she kept a house full of boys in line, but that was before we found Willie. Spare the rod and spoil the child, she'd barked, hands clasped in her lap, when I burst in unannounced, Willie clinging to my waist. We came to a mutual understanding. She would never raise a hand at him again, and I wouldn't call upon my mother. I carried on riding, winding my way through the dawn and into mid-morning. I'd stared at the sky, and I'd raged against God. I'd begged and I'd pleaded. I'd bargained and I'd prayed, but no matter what I did, I couldn't see a way to stop what was to come. The pony heard the noise first, a great, low rumbling. I felt the muscles rippling beneath the saddle as he stiffened. My sweaty palms made it hard to hold the reins. He twisted suddenly, throwing me sideways as I struggled to hold him back. I stared wide-eyed into the oncoming sea of faces, mad with blood fever and cries of the same. The pony snorted and tossed its head, nostrils flaring, before rearing full height and bolting. I tumbled to the earth in a flurry of limbs. I watched in horror as my only means of escape disappeared, almost taking Father Cowper with it. I stood and looked at the crowd. Most of Tranent were there, at least the ones that could be roused from their beds. Leading them was Gilbert Leith, a thick-set man with a scar that ran the length of his cheek, and his nephew Ian. Gilbert spoke first. Elizabeth Crowe, you stand accused of the crime of witchcraft. What do you say? My voice died in my throat. The knot in my stomach tightened until I was almost concave with despair. I instinctively reached for my belly, feeling for anything awry. He carried on. The accused had caused the death of Master Andrew Muir by means of witchcraft. The crowd parted and the silhouette of Master Rivet filled the space, dressed in his finest waistcoat and breeches, which only just fit where they touched. I've seen you leaving the house at all hours of the night, he said. I know she goes to meet with her consort the devil. The murmuring of the crowd quietened as they strained to hear. It's right that you call her a witch. She was the one who brought the sickness upon my poor wife. I swallowed. There was an awed gasp in the crowd as the crowd shuffled uneasily. Everyone in the village I'd known had tended Goodwife Rivet in her sickness under the watchful eye of Agnes. I treated her lameness and delirium to no avail. Even as her condition worsened and the muscular tremors began, there was nothing more could be done for her. It's the nights that she goes to the devil, grinding her herbs and making her charms. She calls her coven to meet at St. Andrew's Old Kirk. Master Rivet spoke slowly and deliberately. I've seen it with my very eyes. The excitement of the expectant crowd grew. You're a liar, David Rivet. And I'm going to leave it there.